Beneath this footage lies a chilling secret, one that would soon shatter a quiet community. It was 1981, and a group of high school cheerleaders gathered to support their football team, completely unaware that a predator watched from the shadows, carefully selecting his next victim. No one could fathom that darkness would ever reach into their world. River Oaks, a town known for champions, also harbored a growing rumor, a whisper that twisted with every retelling. The people had no idea that a monster was lurking right among them. One victim after another could be traced back to a single haunting photograph. The killer was choosing his prey based on who might be next in that image. As handgun sales surged, new residents found themselves trapped in fear, forced to lock their doors and hide behind walls. Rumors swirled. Some said 7 victims, others 8 or 9, with police accused of concealing the truth. This was no ordinary investigation. Authorities were actively withholding crucial information, leaving the public in darkness. But 3 determined cheerleaders refused to wait for justice and decided to take matters into their own hands. With every lead they uncovered, the horrifying reality became clear. The murderer was closer than anyone had imagined. Now, the fate of their friends rested in their hands as they prepared to confront the killer and end his reign of terror. This case would become one of the most controversial in Texas history, and even decades later, the battle to stop the River Oaks cheerleader killer remains unresolved. It was a Friday night in River Oaks. The cheerleaders were preparing for a big game at Boswell High School in nearby Fort Worth. While Rea Stratton, Lisa Tickner, and the squad headed out, 16-year-old Susan Brown waited at home for her friend Roxy, another cheerleader, to come and pick her up. Susan was a junior in the fall of 1980. She cheered alongside Rea Stratton. Without a driver's license, Susan relied on rides to get around. Her parents had gone out to dinner with friends that evening. Susan was counting on Roxy to pick her up, but Roxy was running late. As Susan waited anxiously in her uniform, the kitchen phone suddenly rang. She could hear someone breathing on the other end. After several attempts to say hello, a male voice finally asked if her parents were home. When Susan answered no, the caller abruptly hung up. Seconds later, the phone rang again, expecting the same stranger. Susan was relieved to hear her sister's voice on the line. But as they spoke, the front door creaked open behind her. In a town with just 7,000 residents and almost no crime, doors were rarely locked. Susan told her sister to wait, quietly hung up the phone, and cautiously moved toward the entrance. What she saw froze her in terror. A tall man stood shirtless, wearing a red mask, his jeans unzipped, in the middle of the room. Without hesitation, Susan turned and fled. The man chased her down, commanding her to stop crying before forcing himself on her. Susan endured in silence until faint sounds from the telephone caught the attacker's attention. Her sister was still on the line. Realizing they were not alone, the assailant shoved Susan aside and fled. Susan scrambled to her feet, desperate to glimpse her attacker, but all she saw were distant headlights disappearing into the night. The police arrived shortly after, but they failed to take her to the hospital. They neglected to perform a rape kit or follow proper procedures, a failure that haunts Susan to this day. That night would change her life forever. It was the beginning of a nightmare. 2 days later, Susan returned to school, pretending all was normal, unaware that her teammates felt betrayed by her absence at the Friday game. Her friends expressed frustration, questioning why she hadn't found a ride or managed to show up. Only after their sponsor intervened did they realize something terrible had happened and were told to stop pressing Susan. They were even warned not to ask her about it. Respecting the request, Lisa and the others kept their distance, but the silence cut deeper than any words could. In those days, the stigma around rape was suffocating. Victims were often blamed. Susan just wanted to keep it hidden. She felt ashamed, trapped by a terrible secret. Her friends, meanwhile, focused on trivial matters like prom plans, unaware of the pain Susan carried. Even the police gave up quickly. With no suspects or evidence, they placed the burden on Susan to identify her attacker. They told her to remain vigilant, since most sexual assaults were committed by someone the victim knew, and to report any suspicious behavior. Returning to cheerleading, Susan found herself scanning the faces in the stands, afraid someone was watching. Though she performed cheers, her mind was consumed with suspicion and fear. Then, a second assault struck the town, signaling a dark pattern emerging. Though the details of Susan's disappearance remained murky, whispers began circulating later that year. A 35-year-old junior coach and a 19-year-old former cheerleader were both violently attacked under eerily similar conditions. Both victims reported receiving unsettling phone calls minutes before their homes were invaded by a tall assailant clad in a red mask. In recent months, at least 3 young women from River Oaks experienced brutal sexual assaults. One victim, a mother and Pee Wee League cheerleading advisor, found her life shattered after an October attack in her own home. She has since barricaded herself indoors, gripped by fear. The perpetrator stole an irreplaceable part of her life. That loss is permanent. He holds on to what she can never reclaim. Her home has become a fortress of fear. She fears letting her children walk to school, yet she remains haunted by the dread that safety may never return. With 2 attacks occurring just a month apart, one might expect the community to be on high alert. Instead, local police chose silence, withholding public warnings. Life went on as if nothing had happened, while senior cheerleaders like Rea and Lisa graduated, stepping into an uncertain future. On December 7, 1981, after a long, exhausting shift, Lisa returned home late, unaware that danger lurked just beyond her doorstep. Like many teenagers, Lisa carried the illusion of invulnerability, convinced that such horrors simply could not touch her. She believed that couldn't happen to me. Before bed, she checked on her mother, bedridden in the living room, mute and motionless from a neurodegenerative disease. Lisa wished her mother a good night, then retreated to her room, quickly succumbing to sleep. But her rest was abruptly shattered when a tall man in a red mask forced open her door, yanked back her sheets, and seized her by the throat. In that terrifying moment, Lisa's mind raced with a single desperate thought. She wondered aloud where her mother was, fearing the worst, while the assailant whispered that he would spare her mother if Lisa obeyed his commands. The masked attacker then subjected Lisa to a brutal assault, mere meters from her vulnerable mother. When he finished, he shoved her aside and left the room. Gathering her strength, Lisa rolled over, followed him into the hallway, and watched in stunned silence as he removed his mask right in front of her mother. The sheer audacity of the attacker, walking past her helpless mother without fear of identification or challenge, left Lisa shaken to her core. She asked her mother if she was all right, but her mother only inquired who the man was. Realizing she could not reveal the truth, Lisa told her mother it was just a friend, trying to shield her from the horror. Once she confirmed her mother's safety, Lisa broke down, calling a trusted friend for help. That friend later recalled the deep shock and sorrow she felt upon hearing Lisa's story. She was devastated for her friend. At the time, she hadn't connected Lisa's assault to Susan's case, but soon the links became impossible to ignore. The very next day, another victim emerged. Roxy's sister was raped in her own home, marking the 5th attack. All victims shared a chilling connection to their cheerleading squad. As the masked man's assaults escalated, Lisa and Susan refused to wait for the police's sluggish response. Determined, Lisa took it upon herself to confront the sisters and investigate. Comparing their experiences, the victims noted striking similarities. The attacker's shirt, build, and jeans all pointed to the same individual. During their discussion, a disturbing realization surfaced. Wesley Miller, Roxy's boyfriend, was present as they tried to identify someone matching the masked man's build. They mentioned to Roxy's father that the attacker resembled Wesley, prompting him to summon Wesley to compare arm size. When Wesley's arm was examined, it matched the size perfectly. Wesley reacted by abruptly withdrawing and retreating upstairs without a word. Even Roxy began to doubt Wesley, asking if he could be responsible, though both women found the idea hard to accept. Before they could delve deeper, a new victim appeared. This time, the masked man struck boldly in broad daylight at a busy laundromat, fleeing only when onlookers intervened. As terror gripped the community, residents took control of a police-organized crime prevention hearing, demanding answers for the authorities' silence and inaction. Many accused the police department of covering up nearly 6 rapes in just a few months, or outright deceiving those seeking the truth. Rumors swirled that these incidents had simply been ignored, leaving victims and neighbors in the dark. The community remained unaware of the rapes in River Oaks until a neighbor stepped forward to share what they knew. Frustration grew as emotions rather than logic guided the public's response. The atmosphere was charged, and even amidst hesitation, the subject demanded attention. The police chief acknowledged the sensitivity but admitted they could not always disclose every detail. Attendees had not come for a routine crime prevention lecture. They were there to hear the chilling, sordid details of a rape case that haunted the town. Despite the chief's explanations, many residents remained unsatisfied, feeling vulnerable as the police refused to confirm the presence of a rapist still lurking in River Oaks. For a brief period, the entire community took matters into their own hands, adopting heightened security measures. Firearm sales surged, and an unofficial curfew quietly took hold. But as days passed without further attacks, the tension began to ease. People gradually lowered their guard. Around this time, Rea Stratton moved in with her childhood best friend, Amy Moody. Cautious, but trying to live normally, they started locking their doors at night, remaining vigilant. Rea often went to her parents' home to do laundry during that week. As she left one day, her father warned her that the man who had attacked her friends was still out there. Rea responded defiantly, insisting that the attacker would have to kill her first. He would never succeed in raping her. Then came Thursday, January 21st, 1982. Amy returned home from work and parked beside Rea's car, only to find the apartment's front door wide open. She hesitated in the darkness, unable to make sense of the scene inside. When Amy switched on the light, she was met with a gruesome sight. Blood covered the carpet, splattered across the walls, an overwhelming, horrific mess. Fleeing outside, Amy sought help from her sister next door, who grabbed a baseball bat before they returned cautiously to the scene. They tiptoed around the living room to avoid the blood, following a distinct trail that led to Rea's bedroom. It appeared someone had tried to shove Rea into the closet, but the door hadn't caught. There, Rea lay with her wrists slit, a knife still embedded in her chest. Amy was struck by disbelief, unable to accept that Rea could be dead, determined to get her help. She immediately called the police and alerted Rea's family. Soon, the area was cordoned off with police tape, as neighbors and relatives gathered in shock and sorrow. Before leaving, Rea's father had one last heartbreaking task. He steeled himself, not breaking down right away. His focus was on finding answers. Who could have done this? Was it the same person behind the rapes? The body of 18-year-old Rea Stratton, a former cheerleader and lifelong River Oaks resident, was discovered that Thursday night. She had been stabbed 38 times in a brutal attack. Known for her fiery spirit, Rea never hesitated to speak her mind. That tenacity might have contributed to the violent fate she met. Rea fought fiercely until the end. Detective Dennis Timmons took over the investigation. A newcomer from Fort Worth, he was unfamiliar with the earlier masked man case that had gripped the town. Timmons focused intently on the crime scene itself. The extent of the violence was excessive. Whoever killed Rea had gone beyond what was necessary. The expression frozen on her face pleaded silently, as if begging for justice. "Avenge me. I was not meant to die like this. Help me." At the time, DNA profiling was still years away. Detective Timmons had little more than the crime scene, the victim, and scarce witness testimony. Amy Moody, traumatized and nearly speechless, was spared immediate questioning. Instead, Timmons sought out other witnesses at the scene. Suspicion soon fell on the usual suspect, Rea's boyfriend, Dale Kinston. As in countless crime dramas, the first person investigated is often the closest partner. Dale was considered a possible suspect, but his alibi was solid. He lived with his parents. At the time of the attack, he was only away to run an errand to the cleaners. This timeline ruled him out as the perpetrator. After Dale was cleared, he joined Rea's sister Rona in questioning neighbors. Multiple witnesses reported seeing a red truck parked near the apartment around 5 p.m. Only one person Dale knew matched both the description and drove a red truck: Wesley Miller, a defensive back on the football team. For Rona, the name Wesley Miller was not entirely new. Weeks before Rea's murder, she had asked her sister about the rapes. Rea had told her the suspect looked like Wesley Miller, though Rona did not know who he was at the time. Realizing the urgency, Rona set out to investigate. Wesley attended the same school as Rea. He was well-liked and handsome. He appeared friendly, never someone you would suspect of such crimes. Detective Timmons' investigation took a sharp new direction after focusing on Wesley. The lead investigator knew he had to verify the details quickly, uncertain of their truth. Time was against him, with a murderer still at large, hunting in the shadows. Wesley, a schoolmate of the victim Rea, was the picture of charm and approachability. The day after the murder, a call came in from Roxy, Wesley's girlfriend, adding a new layer to the case. She revealed it was her birthday the night before, and when Wesley showed up at her place, his jeans were drenched in blood. He claimed it was from a football injury. Though hesitant to believe Wesley's involvement, Roxy was resolute in seeking justice, especially for her sister, who had been attacked by the masked assailant months earlier. Without hesitation, Roxy handed over the bloody jeans to Detective Timmons. Now, the timeline began to clarify. We knew when Rea returned home from work. We knew when Amy found her. And just 3 minutes later, Wesley showed up at Roxy's house, barely a mile away, wearing those blood-stained blue jeans. The pieces fit together like a grim puzzle. That day, 19-year-old Wesley Miller was charged with the murder of Rea Stratton. Miller had been voted best all-around senior at his high school the previous year, the same school where Rea was a cheerleader. Then came the chilling realization. Wesley matched the description of the rapist. He knew Rea would be home that night because Roxy was supposed to pick her up. Everything began to fall into place. The pieces aligned. The evidence pointed to the cheerleader's attacker. Looking at photos of the cheerleading squad, names surfaced. Susan here, Lisa there, and of course Roxy. Roxy's sister had been raped. The police lineup showed all the cheerleaders on the left side. Wesley denied any involvement in the rapes, but the evidence was damning. Not only did the blood found at the crime scene and on his jeans match Rea's, but his fingerprints were also linked to one of the other rape scenes. The man the town had dubbed the Cheerleader Slayer was finally unmasked, but no one could have anticipated that the battle to stop him would stretch on for over 20 years. Once in custody, Wesley confessed and pled guilty to Rea's murder, along with 5 rape charges, some involving minors, and the brutal murder that overshadowed it all. Everyone expected a swift trial ending in a life sentence, but the case took a complicated turn. Wesley secured a top-tier defense attorney who devised a cunning strategy. The lawyer convinced the jury that Wesley was a young man with his whole life ahead of him, framing the murder as a tragic youthful mistake. What ultimately tipped the scales in Wesley's favor was the defense's ability to separate the rape charges from the murder, weakening the prosecution's case and ensuring a reduced sentence. They repeatedly asked the district attorney when Wesley would face charges for the rapes. Throughout the process, the jury was kept in the dark about Wesley's status as a suspect in multiple rapes before the trial even began. In the end, his life sentence was reduced to 25 years, a verdict that shocked victims and prosecutors alike. The proceedings deteriorated into a farce, stripped of any mention beyond Rea's murder. The prosecutor found himself trapped, outmaneuvered by Wesley's defense attorney, while Wesley benefited from a deeply ingrained Texas leniency toward athletes. Football holds significant sway in Texas. Time and again, football players seem to receive the benefit of the doubt from juries. There is a desire to cut them a break, to give them a chance. That their status as football players matters in court, when it shouldn't, is an uncomfortable truth. People often remarked that Wesley had potential, but few ever spoke about Rea's potential. The life stolen from her. On October 21, 1982, the jury, unaware of the extent of Wesley's crimes, found him guilty but sentenced him to only 25 years. Prosecutors recalled the anguish that washed over the jurors' faces when they finally learned of Wesley's full history. He faced multiple other rape charges and yet could be released on parole in just 8 years. For the victims, it was a crushing blow, almost a slap in the face. They wanted justice, but 25 years was not justice. It was no justice for any of them. The thought crossed their minds. What about their own cases? They hoped this would strengthen the case. They believed the other rape charges would finally bring him down. Lisa and the other survivors fought relentlessly to ensure Wesley faced full punishment, but only one rape conviction was secured. Worse still, his rape sentence was set to run concurrently with his murder sentence, adding no extra time behind bars. Shockingly, Wesley Miller, convicted of Rea Stratton's brutal murder, became eligible for parole just 2 years after his trial. Survivors feared for future victims, vowing never to let him walk free without a fight. Despite their tireless efforts, Wesley was granted parole after serving less than a third of his sentence. Though banned from several counties, he swiftly reoffended upon release, this time in Wichita Falls. Breaking news: a Wichita Falls woman survived a terrifying attack by a convicted murderer. Authorities reported that Laura Bernard was assaulted outside her home, but managed to escape and lock herself inside. Her husband pursued the suspect as he tried to flee the scene. He instructed Laura to grab the car keys while he jumped in the vehicle and gave chase. Overwhelmed, Laura admitted she was too scared to even look at the man chasing them. Her husband urged her to focus on getting the license plate number. From that moment, Wesley cycled in and out of prison, either reoffending or refusing to comply with sex offender rehabilitation programs. As his 25-year sentence neared completion in 2006, the survivors' fight to keep him behind bars became a desperate race against time. Lisa, Susan, and Rona fought relentlessly to have Wesley legally recognized as a sexually violent predator. If successful, Wesley would be subjected to mandatory supervision for life, effectively stopping him from ever harming another woman again. On October 23, 2006, the former cheerleaders faced their attacker in court for a pivotal hearing. During his deposition, Wesley denied any knowledge of the assaults, before awkwardly trying to earn sympathy by mentioning the leniency of his sentence and offering an apology to Rea's family. He was questioned about his 1982 murder conviction. He admitted to the conviction and the 25-year sentence. When asked if he thought the punishment was fair for Rea's murder, he confessed it was not fair, explaining he was guilty and it was a grave crime. He believed the sentence should have been harsher. When prompted to address Rea's family, he offered a reluctant apology and asked for their forgiveness. This rare show of remorse came only after years of silence. Rona had faced Wesley in court many times before, yet he never once expressed regret or apologized without being pushed, until this final hearing. He had 25 years to show remorse, but never once felt compelled to do so until now. When asked if they were ready to accept the possibility of losing the case, they acknowledged the uncertainty, but stood firm, knowing their case was laid bare in court. The ultimate decision would rest with the jury. After losing Rea, Lisa, Susan, and Rona pledged to do everything possible to keep her killer behind bars. Their mission was twofold: expose Wesley's true nature to the world and honor Rea's memory. They hoped Rea understood that her story would live on beyond the grave, and that Wesley Miller would never be allowed to hurt others again. While battling the legal system, Lisa became a proud mother of 3. Rona took a seat on the governing board of the Texas Civil Commitment Office. Susan pursued a career as a forensic genealogist, helping solve cold cases. During the hearing's final phase, the 3 friends sat side by side, waiting as the jury read Wesley's fate. The jury found beyond a reasonable doubt that Wesley suffered from a mental disorder that drove him to violent acts. They answered yes. Their unwavering determination forced the justice system to act, ensuring Wesley remained under civil commitment for life. This hard-fought victory proved that justice can prevail, even against the most daunting odds. When asked if the verdict matched their expectations, they described a profound relief and a deep sense of validation. They recalled how Wesley was truly capable of murder, something Rea never deserved. They knew he was the attacker responsible, and now, at last, justice had an answer. This video was made possible with support from private internet access.